You're an expert and you love to share your thoughts. However, you know that you're not able to just make money by just sharing your thoughts. You have to actually bring value. And that's where the rubber meets the road. You want to bring value, but you don't know how to do that and make a profit. Well, today I have Cliff Ravenscraft who knows how to build a profitable online business around your expertise. And trust me, you're going to want to stay throughout this whole show because Cliff has been around the block. He knows a lot of the OGs in this space and knows what works and doesn't work. So, Cliff, welcome to the show, my friend.
Ken, thank you so much. It is an honor to be here, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Before the show, we were talking about just all the colleagues and friends that we've known, and we've kind of been circling around each other for years. And now we finally get to hang out and talk. And I'd love to just for you to share with people what is it that you exactly do and how do you help them?
Wow, what is it that I do? Well, I entertain, educate, encourage, and inspire people to fulfill the life of their dreams. That would be the quickest way I would describe it. Many people know me as the podcast Answer Man. Since 2006, I have helped more than 40,000 people in the world successfully launch a great sounding audio podcast. And over the last 8.5 years, I've been helping those content creators overcome all sorts of challenges when it comes to building a profitable, responsible, predictable, generating income style business around their expertise, doing a lot of business strategy and mindset coaching. So, who am I? I would say I've mostly known as the podcast answer man, and those who begin working with me sometimes think that they really enjoy working with me as the mindset answer man.
I I love that. Well, it, it's funny because when you start podcasting, you actually realize how many mindset issues you do have, right? From like getting on the mic, or if you're doing a video, right, podcast, getting in front of a camera, learning to talk, learning to host, learning to get your expertise out there. I'm sure you see a bunch of mindset obstacles that come about all the time.
Absolutely. And also the fear of what will people think of me? Who am I to put myself out there as an expert? There are so many other people who know things more than I do. They have more experience than I do. Why would anybody want to listen? I mean, the number of limiting beliefs that challenge those who are getting into either content creation and or building a business around their expertise, yeah, it's a minefield of mindset issues.
Yeah. What made you decide? I'm sure you've had an amazing progression of now helping people with mindset, but what made you to decide to even get into the space of learning how to become the podcast answer man to now being the mindset answer man?
Sure. Well, it all stems back when I started podcasting as a hobby back in December 2005. I'd already been blogging for over a decade. I s- and after a decade of blogging, I had about 300 people around the world who would routinely come and read my blog, which was about faith and technology and anything else that I was interested in. It was kind of just a hodgepodge. I would just generally blog about anything and everything. And I discovered podcasting as a consumer in the summer of 2005. And later, my wife introduced me to this television show called Lost. And as I saw the final episode of the first season of that show, I'm like, what in the heck is this show about? And I discovered there were five other podcasts devoted to the TV show Lost. And I
Wow.
subscribed to all five of them. And little did I know, there were millions of people around the world who were obsessed with this television show. Most of modern television show today that's bingeable got its start from what Lost created. And so the actual producers of the show had the official Lost podcast with Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. And so I would listen to that. They had an online forum with all these Easter eggs and clues and that were hidden in the episodes. And I would listen to these shows and I would be the king of the water cooler everywhere I went. And I'm like, did you see this? Did you know that this was in there? If you zoom in on this book, it means this. And people would get really excited for about 10 minutes and they're like, okay, Cliff, we're going to go talk about sports again. So I had this passion for Lost and not an outlet for it. So I started blogging about it. When I started blogging, I recognized that all of a sudden I've gone from 300 viewers on my blog per month to just over 1,000. And I thought I had made it, right? It's like, oh my gosh. At the time, I was an associate pastor as a part-time thing, just, that I'd been doing for 10 years. I was also at this time in insurance for a decade as an insurance agent in a agency that was owned by my mom and dad, started by my grandfather in 1937. All of this is an important part of my story. And so here I am. I've got a very successful insurance career. I've got all of these other things. I don't need more things in my life. But I discovered a theory about this TV show based upon everything I heard. I blogged about it and I'm like, the world has got to know I figured this out. So I recorded a 3.5 minute MP3 audio file and I sent it to Ryan Azawa in Hawaii. He had the Transmission podcast, which is one of those 5 lost podcasts. He played my 3.5 minute audio file where I shared the theory. I set it up. I said, I have figured it out. I know the entire show's entire premise. I have documented everything with screen captures side by side. Go check out my blog. I have solved it. I heard my voice in his podcast and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my voice is in somebody else's podcast. This is so amazing. I woke up the next morning and I went to go check out my blog to see if I had any comments. And all I saw was a big, huge white screen and big, bold black letters in capital letters. It says account suspended,
Oh no.
bandwidth exceeded, and it says contact billing department. And so what happened was the billing department says, well, Cliff, first of all, your site has had over 1 million views overnight, and your images are 18 megabytes per image, and you have all of these images in your blog posts. You owe us thousands of dollars. And I'm like, no, I can't afford thousands of dollars. So they actually wiped everything clean and they taught me how to compress images. So that was a learning experience. But the interesting thing was is that one, by the way, the Transmission podcast had about 20 or so thousand subscribers to it. One of them happened to be a creative director for Entertainment Weekly. And that person heard my podcast or heard my feedback on the show, went to my blog and said, oh my gosh, this guy has absolutely figured it out. He's convinced me. And EW.com linked to my blog post saying this guy figured it out. And so that's what happened. Long story made short, basically I had people say, Cliff, oh my gosh, you should create a podcast. You should create a podcast. And then I'm like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. I'll figure out how to hand code an RSS feed and with HTML or with a text editor, and I'll figure out how to upload MP3 files to a server and put the media enclosure in there. And we had to do all this manually. There wasn't software for this back then. And so I figured it all out. And I put my very first podcast episode. It was called the Generally Speaking Podcast. And I basically I was very timid. I didn't speak the way that as a matter of fact, let me kind of just illustrate how it was. Hello, everybody. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and this is the Generally Speaking podcast. And I don't know if anybody's really going to be interested, but let me tell you a little about myself. I
No
really like. It was just absolute. It was a train wreck. But what I did is I said, I don't think anybody is going to want to hear me talk about Lost because everything I know about Lost, I learned from other podcasts.
Yeah.
And I don't think the only people who know about a podcast right now are tech people. And so while I'm interested in tech, you get most of what I know about tech, I learned from other people. And so I don't know if anybody wants to hear me talk about faith because there's all these Christian broadcasters who now have podcasts. So you know what? This is me generally speaking about anything and everything. So I thought I'd take the same approach with my podcast as I did with my blog. Well, I published it, and to my surprise, 500 people downloaded that first episode, and people started emailing me immediately. They said, Cliff, if you were to do a podcast every week devoted to your thoughts on the television show Lost, I would subscribe to this podcast instantly. But I don't care about what you have to say about faith, and I don't care what you have to say about technology. So I went to my wife, who introduced me to the show, and I said, hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast with me? And of course, as everyone you talk to about a podcast in 2005, what's a podcast? And so she says, sure. She's thinking, we'll do this for about 2 or 3 weeks and you'll lose your interest. Let's do it. So episode number 2. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the weekly Lost edition of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. because I knew then by episode 2, I would have an entire podcast network of shows, not just this one podcast. Because
Yeah.
so now and by the way, those 5 podcasters devoted to the TV show Lost created a blogger account, which also had an RSS feed. And there was a way to turn an RSS feed from Blogger into a podcast feed. And they all shared this account and they called it the Lost Podcast Network. By my 3rd episode, and my wife and I are second together, they invited us to join the Lost Podcast Network. And because of that, when you can take all of the subscribers to that network plus the subscribers of my own feed, we hit 27,000 downloads for our 3rd episode.
Wow.
And that's how all of this got started. And then eventually my wife and I started a podcast for Grey's Anatomy fan podcast, Desperate Housewives fan podcast. Over the years, we've done the Hunger Games podcast, the Twilight Saga podcast. We've done Family from the Heart, Business Tech Weekly, Help I Got a Mac, Social Media Serenity. I could go 55 shows, over 5,000 episodes in the last 20 years. But to answer your question, how did Podcast Answer Man get started? In the first year of podcasting, remember, I'm a full-time insurance agent, I'm an associate pastor, and in my free time, I'm producing 7 to 15 podcast episodes a week, at least an hour each. And people were emailing me saying, Cliff, I have one podcast. It's 45 minutes each week, and it takes me about 4 to 6 hours per episode. How are you producing 7 to 15 episodes every week in your free time? And I'm like, I'd love to get on a call and find out what you're doing to waste all your time. And so remember, people didn't want to talk to me about Lost, right? There's like, Cliff, I'll give you 5 minutes of my time about this water cooler stuff about Lost. They wanted to give me 0 time locally to talk about podcasting. And so people said, Cliff, oh my gosh, I just learned so much from you. I just got back from a conference. I invested probably about $5,000 in this conference, spent the last 4 days out in California. I got more value in 35 minutes with you on this call than I did in that entire event. You have to start charging for this. So in December 2006, after hearing that about 20 times, I launched this little show called Podcast Answer Man. And I said in the very first episode, guys, my name's Cliff Ravenscraft. I've been podcasting for a year. I've already got several thousand hours invested in this. I produce 7 to 15 podcast episodes a week. And the most common questions I get today is, how do I do things related to podcasting? And so I created this podcast. It's called Podcast Answer Man. It's not because I have every answer, although with the amount of experience I have a lot of answers. I learned a lot of things along the way. Happy to share all of that with you. But anytime you have a question I don't have the answer to, you'll be hard pressed to find somebody who's more passionate about podcasting than I am. And I know how to go get answers. So this is the Podcast Answer Man. And the next phrase I said, wouldn't it be cool? And I'm just dreaming here out loud. Wouldn't it be cool if one day, maybe 5, 10 years down the road, instead of taking over my family's insurance agency, wouldn't it be cool if I could make a living from being a podcaster behind this microphone instead? And little did I know that 12 months after that, I would leave the family business and become full-time self-employed as the Podcast Answer Man.
Wow. And that I'm sure has been a fun roller coaster ride of growing your business. But you've done a lot of fun stuff in those 20 years of growing it. And that's what we're going to talk about in this next part of our conversation is there are a lot of people today who would say, I know podcast is important. I know growing my expertise is important and growing my business is vital. I just don't know how to do it with a podcast. And it seems like everybody and their mom has a podcast. Why should I start one?
Well, that is a very good question, and also I would. It's a good question. Should I actually start a podcast? Is where I would start, because there are a lot of people say that you should, and some of my favorite clients I ever worked with are people who paid for me to teach them how to podcast through my 4-week group training program back in the day called Podcasting A to Z. They paid $4,000 or $2,000 to go through a 4-week program, and ironically, I was able to successfully talk a few of them out of launching a podcast because they weren't ready. They had no clear picture of success. They had no idea what they would do with their podcast, why they wanted to have a podcast. They just knew that they wanted to leave a soul-sucking day job, and they thought this is the path to do it. And I'm like, well, let me ask you a couple of questions about your experience, what it is that you want to be known for. Let me ask you what you're passionate about. Let me ask you how many people have been coming to you asking for your advice in this area, and what are your products and services, and how much are you going to charge? And they're like, it was just like a deer with headlights blinding it. They were stunned. And I'm like, oh, well, here's what I will tell you. You can absolutely launch a podcast. It will sound amazing as far as the technical aspects of it. But my experience has been that you will, if you go into a podcast without knowing the answers to these questions, and your desire is to leave a soul sucking day job and be known for something as a thought leader, and you can't answer these things, you will grow an audience. And then you will eventually try to find a way to ask yourself the question, what does this audience want from me? And then you will probably be 18, 24 months into creating content. You're reaching hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you're making no money. This is exactly what happens over and over again. And so first, what you need is you have to know what problem you're solving for a specific type of person. And I realize that I'm going off of your question. Your question is, why should I start a podcast? But the thing is if you already have a very clear picture of who your ideal client is, you know what problem you solve for them, you've already validated that these people are ready to pay you money for it. The only thing that you're missing is more people to become aware of who you are. If that describes you, then a podcast is very likely a very good step for you moving forward. And why should you consider a podcast among all of the other things? Well, you're right that there are tons more people who have podcasts today than there were 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. However, when I started podcasting, 5% of the population knew what a podcast was. 5% of people in 2010 above the age of 13 listened to a podcast at least once a month. Today, 55% of all Americans above the age of 13 listen to podcasts on a monthly basis, and the number of people who are listening on a daily basis is growing exponentially. So, while yes, there is a lot more voices out there creating podcast content, that the number of hosts of shows has not outpaced the number of consumers of content. And this is why, you got some of these big, huge shows that are done by people who are already celebrities. And then they go and launch a podcast and they get millions of people who are listening to their shows. That's all great for us because now those are millions of people in many cases who really didn't know what a podcast was before. And in some cases, there are a number of them because they're introduced to that person's podcast as a YouTube channel. There are many of them who are under the impression that a podcast is video. But yet over time, people start getting more and more value from podcasts and they realize, wow, there's more content than just these A-list celebrities. And then they realize, oh my gosh, you mean I can listen to an audio podcast in my car wherever I go? This is incredible. And so the number of people who could consume your content to come to know, like, and trust you is incredibly powerful. So why should you consider launching a podcast? Because you already know you've got a proven business model. You just need more people to come to know, like, and trust you. And as far as I'm concerned, an audio podcast, there's nothing wrong with video for added discoverability. But give people an audio version of your podcast and they'll listen to you with headphones on, and they will listen to you, not just click play and watch the first 3 minutes of your piece of content online. They'll click play, go for a walk, go for a jog, walk their dog, drive the car, listen to or do the dishes, all of this. They will listen to your entire 40-minute, 1 hour episode from beginning to end. And if they really like your content, they'll binge listen to the archives. This is the most incredible way to get people to, number one, discover you. And once they discover and they're the perfect fit for who you know you serve, they'll resonate with your content and they'll instantly come to love you.
If, as you think about podcasting, you and I both love podcasting. We've been doing podcasting for years. You've done it a lot longer than I have. I know one of the biggest challenges people have is discoverability and distribution, where they're like, I'm passionate, I'm excited about this. And you're right. You are like, this, people can indulge in it, right? Or binge it, but it's getting people to listen. What have been your strategies to help people grow their podcast from like the 20 downloads to 100 to 1,000 downloads to 20,000 downloads? And people are like, yes, I'm in.
So, the first thing that I attempt to do is help the person understand that until your show has been dialed in, doing anything to grow your audience is kind of a worthless cause. So it does no good for you to reach another 1,000 or 10,000 people only to come and discover your show and then to listen to an episode and bounce. Okay, so a couple of things that I would recommend is when you have, let's just say you've been creating content for about 13, 14 weeks, and you have about, let's just say 70 downloads per episode. So 70 people are listening to your show pretty consistently. The first thing that I would encourage you to do is to get out a spreadsheet, open up a spreadsheet, and open up columns and name them name, email address, personal detail number one, personal detail number two, personal detail number three, and make it a goal to learn about 20 or 30 of those 70 people, everything you can in that spreadsheet. So you want to know 3 personal details of at least 30 of your 70 people who are listening to your show. That means get really good at communicating to that audience that you're wanting to engage with them. Invite them to provide feedback to you. Ask them to email you. Jump on a call with them or engage with them in conversation and dialogue. Ask them to DM you on social media, whatever. Ask them questions and fill out this information. The more you get to know your audience, what's going on in their world, what they're struggling with. So many times we have the curse of familiar, especially of those of us who are experts in our field. We've forgotten some of the things that we just take for granted, the things that we know. We assume everybody knows these things. And I'm reminded of this, the time that I had a woman, she was 73 years old and took my podcasting A to Z course. And she goes, Cliff, I love your tutorials. I got to tell you, up till this point, every single time I've had a question about something to ask you, if I just went 5 more minutes into the episode or into your tutorial, you answered my question. But I just got to tell you, there's one tutorial I'm just stumped. So it's the one on the digital audio recorder. You said insert the SD card. So, but you didn't show what an SD card is and you didn't show how to insert it. So, if you don't mind, Cliff, what is an SD card and how does one insert it? And so it's getting to know who these people are. And by the way, because I had that engagement with that person, the next time that course was launched again, guess what? I actually inserted a picture of an SD card and showed myself inserting an SD card. Now, is that overly simplistic for people who obviously know that? Yes. But now my tutorial has answered yet another question. So when you get to know your audience, they're like, oh my gosh, this guy, he must be reading my journals or my diary. This guy knows what's going on in my head. And also, if you can get to know those first 30 people in your audience, start speaking to them. Ask them for permission to say things that inspire you about them. Begin speaking to them and about them in your show. And who else out there loves to hear themselves praised in public, right? And you might be surprised how many times it's like, oh my gosh, listen to this podcast. This guy's awesome because obviously he's talked well about me. And also, if you are communicating at such a level that, man, you're just meeting need after need after need, the idea is like, man, I just shared your episode with a friend of mine. When you start getting this kind of engagement, when you start getting this kind of connection and you're hearing people share your show, that's when you are ready to start growing. And the strategies I would use there, number one, I would become a guest on other people's podcasts. That way, you don't have to ever educate somebody who you're just getting out there and meeting for the very first time what a podcast is. When you're a guest on somebody else's show, they're already listening to that show in a podcast app of their choice. And so you can say, hey, where's the best way to find me? Well, the first thing I would encourage you to do is check out my show, Podcast Answer Man. You can find it in your favorite podcast directory or podcastanswerman.com. And then from there, there's all sorts of things you'll see on my website. And that's the number one way you're going to grow your show is it to a new audience, is find people who already consume content in that way. The next thing that I would do is I would actually have a show that is an ongoing weekly show. This is like Podcast Answer Man. I think I'm on episode 480 of that. The Cliff Ravenscraft show, I'm on episode 803 of that. So just keep producing every single week, show up consistently, same time of day, same day of the week, every single week, and be there consistently so people can make you a part of their life. However, the more episodes you have in your feed, the less appealing it is for somebody to come in and try to binge listen to everything you've done. If anything, most people will listen to the most recent episode and see, oh, you know what? I'll just go ahead and archive the 802 episodes before this one, and I'll just start listening from here. Unless that episode really resonates. And I do love it. I just recently had a voicemail come back from somebody named Mike Hill who says, Cliff, I just started listening to Podcast Answer Man again. And I got to tell you, I've been listening to probably about 4 or 5 episodes a week every week for the last 6 weeks. And so some people will binge. But the second strategy to grow your audience above and beyond being a guest on other people's show is to go launch other podcasts, not weekly ongoing shows, but what I call a mini series. I'll give you an example of this. I have a podcast called Upgrade Your Peer Group, The Power of Mastermind Groups. And if you go to upgradeyourpeergroup.com, you'll find that there are only 6 podcast episodes for that show. There will never be a 7th episode. The entire thing is meant to be just like an online course in 6 audio podcast episodes of everything I would want to share with you about mastermind groups and how you could benefit from being in one. And if you don't know how to go and join one, how to start your own. And so I put that podcast out, never really marketed it. However, people are looking for mastermind groups on our books on mastermind groups in Audible. And because podcasts are available in Audible, you can put your podcast in their directory. People are looking for audiobooks on mastermind groups. They find that there aren't really many in there, if any at all. But the results show Upgrade Your Peer Group, the power of mastermind groups. And because of that, I earned $90,000 within 30 days of publishing that podcast episode just from people who found it in Audible. And so that's another way. And then all of a sudden, somebody finds your podcast related to a niche topic. Imagine there are only 6, 7, 8, or 9 episodes on that topic, but every single episode is a 10 out of 10 in quality, amazing value, and direction and transformation. So they go and they binge listen to every single episode. And by the end of it, your call to action could be check out, if you think this is good, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what I'm sharing. Check out my show, The Cliff Ravenscraft Show, that has over 800 episodes in the archives as of this date. And here's how you can find it over at thecliffravenscraftshow.com. Those are the 2 best ways for discoverability. Be a guest on other people's shows and create mini series that speaks to niche audiences who are looking for content related to problems that they're looking to solve.
Okay, you just gave a masterclass, and I love it because there's so much that we could dig into, and I'm sure it's in your course. So if you guys are interested, go check out Cliff's stuff. Cliff, when it comes to the mini series, one of the objections I could hear people say is, why start a mini series versus just putting it in the Cliff Ravenscraft show?
Sure. So, Ken, let me ask you this. Okay, so let's just say you wanted to know about email strategies for growing your email list. Would that ever be appealing to you to hear seven valuable pieces of content where you get seven different strategies? Imagine I tell you, you know what? There's a friend of mine. His name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and he's got a show. It's called the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. I remember, gosh, I think it was, I can't remember if it was 2018, 2019, somewhere in his archives, he did 7 episodes on email strategies. I know the email strategies was in the title of the episodes. You should go check it out. It's over at thecliffravenscraftshow.com. Just subscribe to it and scroll through the 800 or so episodes and see if you can't find that. Okay, now realistically, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you going to go do that?
If there's hundreds of episodes that I got to scroll through, I'm out.
Exactly. Now, imagine, hey, Ken, you know what? There's this guy, his name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and he did a podcast called 7 Proven Strategies for Growing Your Email List for Online Business Owners. It's over at 7provenemailstrategies.com. Go subscribe. There's only 7 episodes. They're the best, most concise, most valuable episodes on email growth strategies you'll ever listen to. If you never take an online course related to it, listen to those 7 episodes. It's over at 7provenemailstrategies.com, which, by the way, that's not a real domain. But if anybody wanted to go and create it, guess what? Let me ask you this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to go do that?
Oh, way more like it. As soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll take. If I'm listening to podcasts already, I'm gonna go do that
That's
because I know
exactly what I'm saying. And not only that, if you go there and you do it, I almost guarantee you, if you like any of the episodes, you will listen to all 7. And by the end of the 7th episode, you may have never heard my name before, but you will become a raving fan of who I am afterwards. And then you will be interested in going and listening to my other content that I promote throughout the 7 episodes of that show.
Okay, so when you do these mini series, do you end up doing like a campaign launch to like, or you just leave it out there in the ether for people to just start discovering organically?
You can do both, obviously, but for me, I wanted to test this strategy without any promotion. And I will occasionally launch a mini series podcast. I will do nothing to promote it just so I can actually see organic growth from people doing searches in different podcast directories and or Google.
Okay. And then earlier you said you got about $90,000 in revenue from doing this strategy for one of the launches. Was that because Audible paid you, or is it because of the call to actions?
The call to action was $15,000 to be a part of my paid mastermind group. And so these people came through the podcast, and by the end of this 6 episodes, they're like, I know I could start my own, but man, Cliff, you've been in business for so many years. I can hear the credibility, the stories you could tell, the things you've experienced. I'd love to be in a facilitated group with you for the next 12 months. Here's $15,000. And this is somebody who's never heard my name before. And just it happened over and over and over again.
Okay, so one of the things I could see also, and you might have already answered this, but I know people might be listening to this and they have a personal brand issue where they're like, Cliff, I have so many things that I'm passionate about. They're like, I'm passionate about faith, I'm passionate about business, I'm passionate about fitness and AI. Can I have a podcast on all of them, or should I have 4 separate podcasts? But then how do I promote that on socials? What should I do?
Yep. So that's the person who should not have a podcast. That's who I was talking about before. That person who is struggling right there. I can tell you right now, they start podcasts all the time. And they feed the statistic that after 7 episodes, they give up. And I've just seen it over and over again. And by the way, those who make it past the 7th episode, they sometimes get to 300, 400 episodes. And I talk to them every week. People who have done 300 episodes of weekly content. And I ask them, what's your biggest struggle right now? You know what? I'm just barely able to cover my expenses. Well, what are your expenses? $25 a month for the hosting of the show, 30, I bring in about $170 a month because of my podcast. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you have no business model. And so that's what I was trying to allude to. This, like, should I even have a podcast? If you don't know exactly who your exact ideal customer is. Well, first of all, if you don't know how much money you must make every single month, don't do anything. So is that $10,000 a month? Is that $20,000 a month? That's where you start. And then you ask yourself, what do I do, or what do I know? What experience do I have? What problems can I solve? At what level can I get? Could I get one person, one client to pay me $20,000 a month? Most people say no. I say, well, can you get two people to pay you $10,000 a month for a product and sign up for the next year? And most people will say no. Ironically, some people, it's like, okay, can you find 10 people to pay you $1,000 a month? Yes. Okay. Or 20 people to pay $1,000 a month. I'm like, okay, well, there you go. That's your business model. What is your product that you will charge $1,000 a month, where you will get 20 people to pay you so you can make $20,000? Now you have to go find a ideal customer, and that customer has to have five key ingredients. Number one, they have to be people with money. They have to have a problem that they're aware of. They have to be willing to pay to have that problem solved. You have to have the ability to solve it, and you have to enjoy solving it. If you don't enjoy solving it, but even though you can, you won't have a business long term. You'll burn out. So you'll have to have those five key ingredients. You have to know how much you need to earn. Then you find the problem, and then you go find the customer and make sure you validate it before you ever launch your podcast. Make sure people are willing to pay you for that. Then you start creating content to speak directly to the problems and pains and fears and struggles and obstacles of that person and that person alone. And then it doesn't matter if you only have 300 subscribers, because if five of them pay you $15,000 for the next year, and then one of those subscribers out of your 300 becomes a business partner on some venture, and then two of them become outlandish referral people that are consistently sending people your way, it just this you don't need thousands or tens of thousands of people to subscribe to your show. You just need to know exactly who your audience is for. And when the right person finds it, they love it. And so it's never about growing the audience for me. It's always about knowing who my audience is and using that clarity. I want to make sure there's perfect alignment. I want to make sure that I'm leveraging every episode to meet their needs and to give them clarity of what I want them to do next. And then also building relational equity with them. And I do mean it. I genuinely do, still to this day, I have a CRM. Anytime somebody says, Cliff, I just found your podcast and I have a couple of questions for you, I immediately go to my CRM and create a new entry. And I ask them questions to learn who they are. And I discern from that, is this person my exact ideal client avatar? And if they are, I continue an ongoing, persistent relationship, looking to say, how can I be of service to you? And eventually, over time, a very high percentage of those people ultimately become paid clients.
Yeah. And Cliff, I just want to attest to people how much you value relational equity. Because even when I reached out to you, some people were like, well, how'd you get Cliff on the show? I was like, man, I just saw you post something on LinkedIn. I was like, Cliff, this is awesome. I noticed that we have the same connections. Would you want to be on the podcast together? And you were like, yeah, let's do it. And I was just like, oh, cool. Like that's what I love about podcasting, is the amount of networking you can do and build those referral engines like you just talked about is fascinating. Cliff, I know we could talk for hours, man. I could pick your brain on it, but I want to start wrapping up here. As people are listening to you, they might be like, I'm excited. I think those 5 questions I can answer, but man, I'm still just a little stuck. And I don't know how to make this predictable, where people listen and then they buy from me. Like, it sounds good, but there's no like practical how to's. What's a word of encouragement you can give them to help them go through that process and actually pull the trigger and make things happen?
I'll tell you what, instead of a word of encouragement, how about I give them a free course that would normally cost $2,000?
Sure.
I have a course. It's called Building an Online Business, and I've taught it several times live here in my home studio. We built a home with a teaching workshop in it, a whole classroom here. And it's called Building an Online Business. And it was created because all of these people who were creating podcast content for years and not earning a profit. I'm like, guys, you started with step number 8. Step number 8 is create content. you skip the first 7 steps. And if you could actually go through these first steps, and some of the first steps that stand out to me is, number one, what is your why? What makes you excited about life, getting up each day? What is it that you want to accomplish? What is your dream? What is your passion? And then what are your areas of expertise? What are the things that naturally people are coming to you asking for advice for? What is your experience? You build what's called an inventory of value. I'll even give you an assignment, which is a 6-question survey you can send to people that know you, who will share things with you about yourself that you're not currently able to see, as far as the value you're already bringing to people. It'll cut out so much of that imposter syndrome. And then we will develop, you'll actually be encouraged to figure out, how much income do I need to make? And then, okay, what are the types of products and services? And then you're getting into conversations, and your whole obsession will not be to go launch a podcast. Your greatest obsession is, can I get one person to pay me this amount for this thing? And you just keep going after that, after that, after that, before you ever record a single episode. And once one person has paid you, then your objective is to go get a second person. As soon as the third person has paid you for that product service, it's now validated. Now I would go create content and speak to those people. Everything you've learned about them, go speak to those people through the microphone and create a podcast and start answering their questions, and bring in all of the language that you're hearing from these paid clients about how they're communicating. This is what my struggle is. I'm really stuck this week. And just listen closely. Transcribe every conversation and ask your AI tool to pull out every limiting belief, every piece of language of problems and struggles that they have, and anonymize it and create podcast episode to speak to those things. And you'll be shocked at what you'll be able to accomplish.
Cliff, I think people, if they want that course, are going to be super excited. We'll put that all in the show notes as well. And just like you already gave like the quick synopsis of it,
Yep.
but I want people to just be super excited. I mean, I'm walking away from this. My biggest takeaway was part of the distribution part of the process, but just even thinking, how can I be more clear on who this podcast is for and what problems am I answering? So, Cliff, I appreciate that. As I mentioned earlier, we're doing the Fast Five. We're doing an expert-led business trend report segment. These are 5 questions. You just have to answer them real quickly. We just want to get to know you a little bit better. Question number 1 is, what's something in your business you're experimenting with right now?
Vibe coding. I have, in the past 6 weeks, created a podcast app that allows me to subscribe to over 200 podcasts. And I am no longer overwhelmed by all of the podcasts that I'm not typically going to follow anyway. So basically, it allows me to follow the shows that are my shows to make sure that they came out right. And then the shows that I actually follow every week without ever missing. But I've got hundreds of other shows I want to keep up with, my peers. I've got current clients, former clients, and people who are potential clients in my CRM. And I've got over 200 of those shows, and I built in what's called an inbox. I got a podcast inbox. And so I just open it up. Like right now, I'm looking, there's 8 podcast episodes that have come in since I had got podcast inbox 0 last. And I just simply triage it just like I do my email inbox. Am I going to listen to this today? If not, am I going to listen to it within the next couple of days? If not, archive it. And it instantly goes away. But I also, it's called Pod Briefer. So it'll instantly, if I want, it's like, oh, I'm not sure. So I can hit a transcribe button, and it transcribes the entire podcast episode. And then I hit a button that says summarize this for me, and it shows me a summary. And then I can actually do a follow-up question and ask it, say, can you give me more detail about what you mean when they said this? And I'm like, and then I can decide, do I actually want to listen? Yeah, I actually do want to listen to this. Or I can say, you know what? I'm vaguely interested in this. Can you give me 3 paragraphs of information that gives me the essence of what I most need to know as this person? And then it's like, well, here's what it is. It's like, wow. I'll tell you what, can you give me 3 journal prompts to journal on this later? Here's that. copy and paste that into my journal and hit archive and I move on. But I'm also building into the tool that says, you know what? I really enjoyed this episode. Can you create some social media posts where I will tag somebody on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and all or X platform and just I can copy and paste like, hey, I really enjoyed Michael Stelzner's most recent episode of AI Explored with Lauren Bentley on how to clone yourself with AI, and I just copy that and paste it over here and I tag Michael Stelzner and Lauren Bentley. This
Yeah.
is what's being built. I'm vibe coding it. Every little idea and thought that I have, I just tell replit.com and it creates it for me.
I love it. I love it. I'm vibe coding is in my category for my goals for next quarter to start doing. So I might start reaching out to you, be like, hey man.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to me anytime.
Question number two: which part of your business keeps you up these days?
What part of my business keeps me up? Well, I would imagine you mean like keeps me up, like worried about things. I don't worry about anything anymore. I had some major transformation in my life, and life is just hunky dory. And every day I'm above dirt is a great day. And even if I didn't wake up one day and they put me in the ground, that's fine too. I had a great life. So I nothing really keeps me up in that way. But actually, what keeps me up is just the excitement and passion I have to be able to do what I feel most called to do in this world. I wake up every day excited to get out of bed around 4:30 in the morning. It's like, man, I can't believe I get to do what I do today and I get paid well to do it. And so what gets me up in my business is the excitement that I have to get to do what I do.
Yeah, love it. All right, question number three: what's a goal you're building toward this year that you're really excited about?
I just relaunched my podcast Answer Man brand after taking 8.5 years off. And so my goal is to get probably another 10,000 people in the next 24 months into the launch of a successful podcast. And when I say successful podcast, I'm not talking about with massive audience. I'm talking about podcasts that really help serve the people who are listening, but also that profits the people who are creating the content.
All right. Question number four: where do you see the industry, podcasting industry, shifting, and how are you preparing for it?
Well, I'm seeing the podcast industry shifting towards a perception that video is the next evolution of podcasting. And I disagree with it completely. I do think that video is an expansion. It's an opportunity, but I'm seeing it crushing a lot of content creators because anybody can create an audio production that rivals the quality of any FM professional radio broadcasting company in the world within an hour or two or three each week. Whereas to be able to create a video production that rivals the quality of other video out there, it requires many thousands of dollars worth of equipment, lots of specialized knowledge, lots of editing, and all sorts of other things. And by the way, I am not anti-video at all. I support anybody who has the time, effort, and money to pour into those productions. The only thing is I've seen far too many people say, you know what? I heard people say that you're no longer credible as a podcast if you don't have a video version of your show anymore. And as a result of that, I recently made the decision to stop creating video versions of my show just to prove people that that's not true.
I love it.
So that's what I've seen happening in the industry. And another thing, and this is too inside baseball, but for those who know, I will just say this: there's far too many people who are willing to give up on the definition of what a podcast is. And a podcast is defined as a media file, episodic media file that is delivered to the audience via a enclosure inside of an RSS feed. And so when somebody says there are podcasts on Netflix, I say, no, there's not. There's no such thing as a podcast on Netflix. Unless that show is available via RSS feed, it's not a podcast. It's a streaming show.
Yeah. Oh, we could have a lot of fun with that one, but I wanna make sure I'm cautious of your time. Last question: what's the legacy you want to leave behind?
I've already my legacy's already here's what I will say. It is absolutely impossible for me to not leave a legacy behind. And as far as I'm concerned, my entire life, as far as back as I can remember, has been to be a source of encouragement to others. And as far as I'm concerned, if I die today, I've left the legacy I need to leave.
Cliff, thank you so much for your time. If people are like, I want what you have, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. And I will say this, I am one of the most accessible people you'll ever meet. I've never, that's not true. I've said this a couple of times lately. If you email me and pitch yourself as a guest on my podcast, and it's very clear that AI wrote it, I just archive those. But if you actually email me and it's clear that it's a human being and you did not use AI to communicate to me some sort of standard message that was just sent out to everybody who has a podcast, here's what I will tell you. I dare you, email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com, and test me to see if I don't respond.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that one. Cliff, thank you so much for being on the show. And for those listening, I would probably encourage you to listen to this episode twice because Cliff gave such great, valuable insights that you might miss if you just are driving. This is one of those episodes that you listen to while you're driving, you go home, you listen to it again, you take some notes, and then the most important thing, take action. Even if it's imperfect action, you take one baby step at a time. And sooner or later, you will find that you are getting one step closer to the dream you've always wanted. And that's a business that's finally growing profitable. And you have the time to go spend with the people you love. Hope you guys have a great day and God bless.